First one, Robert Herrick. We're going to do we're only doing one of his. Normally in this course, I don't know why I didn't have it on the syllabus. I do 3 or 4 poems by Herrick and 1 or 2 by Marvell. I guess I probably realized at the beginning that I would get way behind like I usually do. Anyways, a little bit, just very brief background about Herrick. You've got a good introduction. I would read over it, be familiar with it. He was a member of what was kind of colloquially, I can't say that word this morning, colloquially called the Sons of Ben. These are followers of Ben Jonson. These are followers/imitators of Jonson. These are people who, some of whom at least, would get together with Ben Jonson and other writers, at a pub, and have a good time. Read each other, their works, things like that. Okay? The Sons of Ben and the Cavalier poets are related tangentially to that. They kind of celebrated these kind of main themes: friendship, conviviality, drinking, fellowship, getting together, community. A lot of it about, somewhat, let's say, above middle class values, thought highly of themselves, things like that. When I said, the Cavaliers are kind of related to that, Cavaliers are, supporters of the crown, supporters of monarchy, okay? But Herrick is in this group, all right? Herrick was a priest, okay? Donne was a priest. Herrick was a priest. And Herbert was a priest. Donne and Herrick wrote both secular and devotional poetry, remember. Herbert wrote only devotional poetry. One of the interesting things about Herrick is that whereas Donne wrote poems with innuendo that could be read, risquely, let's say, some of Herrick's poems were just out and out erotic. I mean, they were almost pornographic. Some of them were almost designed to titillate, all right? But the one that we're going to do, and if we have time, I may go back to just briefly refer to a couple of others of his. The one we're going to do is To the Virgins to Make Much of Time. Okay? This is one of 2 classic Carpe Diem poems that we will do this semester, actually, that we will do today. The other one is the other poem we're going to do today, To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell, or Marvell. So To the Virgins to Make Much of Time. Notice it's just a little short poem, 16 lines. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, old time is still a-flying. And this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. The glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he's a-getting, the sooner will his race be run, and nearer he's to setting. That age is best which is the first, when youth and blood are warmer, but being spent the worse, and worse times still succeed the former. Then be not coy, but use your time, and while ye may, go marry. For having lost but once your prime, you may forever tarry. So, why is this a Carpe Diem poem? Each stanza reinforces that idea. Seize the day, seize the moment, seize the time. Why? Because you don't know when you're going to die. Okay? Look at the first stanza again. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, old time is still a-flying. Okay? Paraphrase of the Latin, Tempus fugit, time flies. You know, see on usually grandfather clocks, you know, the big clocks that stand in a big case, they'll have written somewhere on the face of the clock, Tempus fugit, time flies. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, old time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, that is, it opens, the bud opens today, tomorrow will be dying. There it is. There's the carpe diem. The rosebud opens today, and tomorrow it's dead. Okay? Different image. Glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he's a-getting, the sooner will his race be run, and nearer he's to setting. So, here's the sun. It rises. When it reaches its meridian, middle point, metaphorically, what's left? The declination, the setting. What is this metaphorical middle point? I mean, if you're talking about a 24-hour day, it's 12 noon. All right? In life, it's what? Dante begins his Divine Comedy talking about, you know, midway through this life's journey. It's supposed to be 35 if one takes the Old Testament biblical idea of, you know, 70 years. So the midpoint of life is 35 years. The higher the sun's getting, it reaches its highest point here, its zenith. The sooner will his race be run. Now, we like to think of this as, you know, what does the sun do? It sets like it rises. It's this nice, gentle arc. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, you reach this point, and it's all downhill from there. Okay? That age is best. What age? Which is the first? When youth and blood are warmer. But being spent, that is, when that age is gone, and there is the successive age, the worst and worst times still succeed the former. Why does he talk about youth and blood are warmer? How can blood be warmer when you're young than it is when you're old? Well, it was a Renaissance idea that blood at your ages is like the water in this bottle. You know, I could take this lid off and do this, and it would scatter all over the place. Why? Because right here, it's very fluid. It's very liquid. But, change the image. Change from the image of that water in a bottle to, and I've used this image before, to grease in a pan. Right after whatever the meat is has been fried, that grease, you know, you do the pan like this, and it sloshes and everything. You let it sit for an hour, and it's not as sloshy. You let it sit 2, 3, 4 hours, and it congeals. That's what that image is talking about. In youth, your blood is like that hot, sloshy grease. As you get older, my age, it congeals. Okay? So, being spent, when that age, which is youth, is spent, the worse and worst times still succeed the former. The speaker is saying, your late teens and 20s are the best point of your life. And then what happens? You hit your 30s, and you start to decline. And you hit your 40s, and they're worse than your 30s. And you hit your 50s, and they're worse than your 40s, which were worse than your 30s. And and it's not just time period, like decade. It's also every day is worse than the day before. Seize the day, therefore. Then be not coy. What's coy? Not K-O-I, because that's a kind of fish. What's C-O-Y mean? Shy. Okay. What else? Who's coy usually used to describe? It's an adjective that generally only applies to one sex. Women. Okay? Usually. Is there anything in this poem that indicates the sex or gender of the intended recipient or the listener? Does the title indicate women? To the virgins to make much of time? No, because you can have virginal males. Are there any feminine pronouns? No. It's androgynous in that sense. It could be either one. Okay? Then be not coy, but use your time. And while ye may, while you are still able to, go marry. M-A-R-R-Y. But if you were to hear this poem, unless you are very strict in your pronunciation and in your hearing, you could hear M-E-R-R-Y. Go happy. Go blithely. Okay? But it's go M-A-R-R-Y. So use your time, and while you're able to, go get married. Why? For having lost but once your prime. Okay? Your prime. What's prime mean? The first. Is it referring to first age? Youth. Okay? For if you lose that prime, you may forever tarry. Now, the way it's usually read is that's what he's talking about. He, the speaker. I'm assuming male speaker. Okay? That the male speaker is saying, go use your first age. Go use your prime of your life and get married. Why? Because if you don't, if you wait until you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, nobody's going to want you. Nobody's going to marry you. Why? Because then your blood will be worse and colder. Okay? So you may forever tarry. Tarry means what? Wait. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. You won't get to use it. You'll wait for it. It's also possible that prime means what? Virginity. Having lost but once your prime, the most important thing, you might forever tarry. Because of the Renaissance practice, Renaissance idea, and it goes back to the Middle Ages, that, and this is where it gets more gender specific, that if, a woman is shown on her wedding night to not be a virgin, that could be cause for an annulment. That could be cause for the new husband to go to the authorities and say, her father lied to me. Her father said she was pure, but she wasn't. Okay? If you lose it once, or use it once, you might forever tarry, meaning wait to be married. That's why it says, be not coy, but use your time, and while you may, go marry. It doesn't say, go have sex. Go get married. Okay? Like I said, that's one of the greatest Carpe Diem poems in the English language. Now we're going to go to Marvel, or Marvell, and then we might come back to another one of Herrick's in a moment. So, Andrew Marvell, lengthy introduction. He wasn't of the tribe of Ben or a cavalier poet. He was one of the metaphysical poets. These are, the followers, or if you want, imitators of John Donne. Remember, the metaphysical conceit is that linking together of two wildly disparate things, finding the one thing that kind of is common between them. So the metaphysical poets were poets of the mind, really. They're poets who do these mental gymnastics to try to link these dissimilar ideas. Okay? But he wrote both religious poetry and secular poetry, like Donne did, like Herrick did, but Marvell wasn't a priest, all right? He was secretary for the government. He was a secretary for John Milton for a while, whole bunch of stuff. He was extremely learned. If you read the introduction, started Cambridge University at the age of 12. Was there for, what's it say, 6-7 years, something like that. After university, he got abroad to the continent, learned to speak Dutch, French, Italian, Spanish, a whole bunch of stuff, okay? So, his poem that we're doing, To His Coy Mistress. So it's pretty clear who the intended recipient is. Don't assume the speaker, as I've said with almost all the poems, or everything we've read, don't assume the speaker is Andrew Marvell. Just assume the speaker is some guy. Okay? That's the persona. Notice how it begins. And notice, by the way, it's divided into 3 sections. They're not really stanzas, but... So the first section ends at the end of line 20. The second section ends... Wait, have I got that right? Yeah. Second section ends... 31... at line 32, and then the third section ends at the end of the poem. The poem begins with the word I've used several times before, with a subjunctive, which indicates a condition contrary to fact. Okay? Had we but world enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime. That's the condition contrary to fact. Had we but world enough and time. That's telling us we don't. Right? Had I $1 million, I would give you each 10,000. But I don't. So I won't. Okay? If I did, that'd be cool. We would sit down. So this section, or stanza if you want to call it that, this section begins with this subjunctive. And everything in the section is based upon this kind of condition contrary to fact. Had we but worldly enough in time, this coyness lady, this shyness, we still haven't given a kind of a full range of definitions for that word coy. What else can it be? Hesitant? Hesitant? Both of those are neutral. There's no attribution of any kind of emotion or motive or way of thinking to those. So I'm going to throw one out there. Hard to get. What usually goes before that phrase? Playing. Playing hard to get. See, hard to get just by itself, that's neutral. But when you put playing in front of it, what does it imply? This is a game of sorts. In the male-female relationship, this goes back thousands of years, okay, is taken to be a game or a dance. and what happens in a dance, a formal dance, not like, a rave or something. One person leads, one person follows. And what happens when the person who's leading wants to follow, or the person who follows wants to lead? You get boom. Okay? Remember the description of the wife of Bath? Of the old dance, she knew much. That's the game between the sexes. So, had we but whirled enough in time, this coyness, lady, were no crime. Yeah, okay, she's being shy, she's being hesitant, she's playing hard to get. She's not giving what he wants. Same idea that we saw, by the way, in John Donne's The Flea. Okay? So, if we had whirled in time, we would sit down and think which way to walk and pass our long love's day. We would sit down and say, should we go to our right or go to our left? And we would spend the whole day doing that. I can't speak for any of you, obviously, but I remember being a little kid, being at a friend's house, middle of summer, like August or whatever. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And literally wasting the whole damn day figuring out, what do you want to do? I don't know. Like we had all the time in the world. 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds kind of do have all the time in the world. Thou, by the Indian Ganges side, the Ganges River in India, shouldst rubies find. I, by the tide of Umber, would complain. So, you, if we had all the world in time, you could sit over by the Ganges River, look for rubies. I would sit by the Umber River in northern England, and complain. Complain doesn't talk about, oh, my life sucks, it's so hard, No, he would write love songs. Complaints is what they're called. I would love you 10 years before the flood. What flood? Notice it's capitalized. That's Noah's flood. You got to go back to like Genesis 9 to get when that is. So, I would start loving you 10 years before the flood occurred. And you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. Okay? When are the Jews going to be converted? Now, your gloss mentions, the millennium, gets into, religious eschatological controversy. Eschatological meaning the end times. It's the end of times. Judgment Day, essentially. So, I would love you from 10 years before the flood, and you could wait until the end of time to refuse me. Why? Because if we had world enough and time, if we had eternity, that would account to what? Like the blink of an eye. My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires. Vegetable love? What kind of whack job thinks of love as a vegetable? How do vegetables grow? Plant a pumpkin seed. Takes about 120 days. 4 months. Slowly. That's all he's referring to. It's not referring to size, okay? My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and more slow. The phrase, Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome takes its origin, if I remember the date right, 753 BC, somewhere around there, and it lasted until 400 AD or so, over 1,000 years. That's why the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler was the Third Reich. He thought it would, Third Kingdom, he thought it would last 1,000 years also. The First Reich was ancient Rome. The Second Reich was the Holy Roman Empire. Lasted, not really 1,000 years, but, close. And then he gives us kind of, it's not quite a blazon, but it's close. 100 years should go to praise thine eyes. So, he is cataloging her beauty, but he's not describing it like her lips are red, her rosy cheeks, her golden hair, etc. So, he says, I would spend 100 years on her eyes. Okay? And for it. 200 to adore each breast. So, 200 times 2. So now we're up to 300 years. But 30,000 to the rest. What's the rest? Notice where he starts. He's starting top and heading south. Head, chest, farther down. What's his point? Eyes and forehead and breasts are nice, but that's not what he's after. 30,000 to the rest. An age at least to every part. What's an age? An age isn't usually thought of as 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. It's hundreds or thousands of years. And the last age should show your heart. Why? Getting to the center. Now this kind of, her heart being most important kind of negates this. Or it undercuts it at least. For lady, you deserve this state. Nor would I love at lower rate. And one thing I don't like about whiteboards that I used to love about chalkboards is that nor would I love at lower rate should sound like fingernails across a chalkboard. Because what has he just done? I mean, what is one of the pillars, so to speak, of feminist thought? What do men, according to feminism, tend to do to women or with women? They objectify them, right? They commodify them, turn them into commodity. That's exactly what he's doing. He used what kind of language there? Financial language. I wouldn't love you at a lower rate than that. That's a 2.4% APR. That's about as low as I'm going. That's what that is. But implies always what? There's a change. There's a turn. Okay? At my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. Notice, time is at his back and doing what? Getting closer and closer and closer and closer. It's chasing him. How many of you have read Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death? Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. And the speaker in there is talking about, I'm too busy with life. But death kind of says, no, you're not. Not anymore. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. And yonder all before us, notice, time's chasing, all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. Eternity is described how? Is it a garden? Is it paradise? Is it Eden? How is heaven colloquially, popularly imagined? Yeah, it's this beautiful, wonderful garden where there aren't any thorns, there aren't any weeds, there's nothing bad, everything is wonderful and beautiful. It's like San Diego, weather-wise, it's 72 degrees constantly, etc. No. Now the speaker says, all the future is what? I don't know if you've ever driven there. Drive through the Mojave Desert during the middle of summer. I have, many times. It's 130 degrees in the shade. That's what the future is like. All before us lie deserts of vast eternity. Thy beauty shall no more be found. When? In the future. Nor in thy marble vault. What's the marble vault? It's where the body goes when you're buried. If you're rich and you can afford a vault, not just, a plot in the ground. Nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. In other words, the vault will be filled with what other than the body? Silence. Just silence. Hamlet's final words. The rest is silence. Then, when is the then? When she's in her marble vault, when she's dead. Then shall try that long preserved virginity. Then what shall try that long preserved virginity? Worms. Try, look at your gloss. Test and taste. Worms will take away her virginity. Worms will go in and out, which you didn't let me, the speaker is suggesting, go in and out. In your quaint honor turn to dust. Now, quaint. This book used to have, earlier edition, gave a gloss for quaint that said, what was the word it used? Fastidious. Fastidious, paying real careful attention to honor. Well, Renaissance idea, where do women's, I'm trying to think of correct usage, honor? Where do women's honors? Where does a woman's honor lie? In her virginity. Okay? And he says, that honor, that fastidiousness you have about your virginity, it will what? It will turn to dust. Okay? Debating whether or not I should mention this, but, I will. Just to put everything out in the open. That word quaint, Q-U-A-I-N-T, pronounced almost exactly the same as in Chaucer's use of it in Miller's Tale. Okay? Quainta. The final E is pronounced. In the Miller's, do I have time for this? Yeah. In the Miller's Tale, you've got an old husband, okay, an old man, who has married a gorgeous young woman, okay, who has a lover, a young man. And the old husband kind of thinks something's going on, but he's not sure. And the young lover is named Nicholas. And what Chaucer does is he always gives this adjective to describe Nicholas, henda. Okay? One of the glosses usually given in textbooks is it calls this handy Nicholas, like he's good to have around the house. It's not what it means. Because we're told by the Miller, by the way, the Miller tells a version of a tale that is meant to counter the Knight's Tale. The Knight tells a tale of high honor and romance about two men who fall in love with a woman and they fight each other to the death and she agrees to love one of them and blah, blah, blah. Okay? Well, the Miller's Tale is just the opposite. It's just about raw sex. And morality and truth and honor and chivalry are all a bunch of hooey. Okay? Why? Because the knight belongs to a class where those ideas are held, and the miller is down in the hustle and bustle and the dirty everyday of life. We're also told he's a liar and a cheat. Okay? He puts his thumb on the scales, for example, when he grinds out stuff. So, Hinda Nicholas is in love with Allison, name of the wife of Bath, remember? Okay? Is in love with young Allison, and the old guy kind of thinks something is going on. What am I getting to? We're told that Hinda Nicholas grabs Allison by the quinta. Handy Nicholas. It's not handyman. It's not a guy who's a jack of all trades who can fix everything. It means he's grabby with his hands. Okay? And that quinta and quaint, this one specifically, is the source for the modern English pejorative slang term cunt. Your cunt honor. The honor to that, he says, will do what? It will turn to dust. That is, your body is going to turn to dust. What honor is there? And into ashes, all my lust. Why into ashes? Why is her body going to turn to dust, but his body's going to turn to ashes? I think, I could be entirely wrong. I don't believe, no glosses. I don't believe I've ever seen this glossed anywhere. I think it's possibly an allusion to Paul writing about why young people should marry so that they don't burn in lust. Because if you burn, what happens? If you burn long enough, what's left? Ashes. His lust will turn to ashes. She'll turn to dust, he'll turn to ash. The grave's a fine and private place. I love this couplet. The grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. If you're dead, it's too late. Now, Marvell knew surely of John Donne's poetry, but Donne's poetry had been published multiple times by the time this poem is written. Okay? Donne does have a poem called The Relic about two bodies discovered in a single grave. Okay? Which was common practice. That's why Hamlet, they're digging up a grave to put Ophelia in. And they're pulling up multiple skeletons. All right? But in this poem, you also have a bone, a wrist, with hair wrapped around it. It's a locket of the lover's hair that's been woven like into a bracelet. Okay? That's an embrace of sorts. So, the grave's a fine and private place. Graves are all fine and cool, but none, I think, do their embrace. You don't get to enjoy each other's physical bodies. So, had we but whirled enough in time, but at my back I always hear, now, therefore. What's the therefore? Summation of the argument. This is like a prosecutor standing before the jury and saying, therefore, based upon all the evidence I've submitted up until this point, okay, this is our speakers kind of pulling out all the stops. This is the speakers thinking, okay, I've almost got her. Now, therefore, while the youthful glue sits on thy skin like morning dew. And you've got a big, long footnote. Okay? Read it. I'm not going to talk about it. While the youthful glue sits on thy skin like morning dew, And while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, now let us sport while we may. So go back to the beginning. Youthful glue. Okay? 1681 printed, I will talk about it. 1681 printed edition has youthful hue, which sits on thy skin like morning glue. What's hue? H-U-E. Appearance, complexion. Okay? It's how you appear. When you're young, you, whether male or female, tend to, not real young, not like, teenager with acne and everything, but in your 20s, early 30s and such. You have a complexion that is smooth and clear and attractive. Okay? And it sits on thy skin like morning dew or glue, according to the one tradition. How does dew, for example, sit on grass? It just appears, right? And what happens as the sun comes up? It evaporates. Okay, glue kind of implies it's stuck. But notice the rest of the footnote suggests glue could be a northern dialectal version of glow. While the youthful hue sits on your skin like morning glow. Now that's pretty cool, if you think about that. And while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires. He knew nothing of pheromones, which are those odors, supposedly smells, that bodies give off when they are sexually attracted to another one. Okay? But that's the idea he's talking about. Notice, your willing soul, you want me, you know you do, is what the speaker is saying. And it does what? It transpires. The soul breathes out. Trans, across, spires, breathing, at every pore. Every pore of the body. With what? Instant fires. It's like, you're on fire for me. You already know I'm on fire for you because I talked about my burning lust. So, now is repeated, notice. Let us sport while we may. Let's play. Let's get busy. And now, again, third time, now is always what? It's never in a moment. It sees this moment. Let us now, like amorous birds of prey, rather at once our time devour than languish in his slow chapped power. What are the amorous birds of prey? What the heck is he talking about? He's talking about the Renaissance notion that birds of prey, eagles, hawks, kites, falcons, things like that, the way they would mate is they would fly up to the air, in the air, very high. The male would mount the female and they would stop flying. Yeah, Michaela's not like, what? They would start to fall because they're not soaring and their wings aren't flapping. And they would start to fall as they're mating. And it's kind of like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. That's why we get that rather at once our time devour. Like, we're eating time here, we better, get a move on. Then languish in his slow chapped power. Time. Why is time described as slow chapped? Slowly chewing. The depiction at the bottom of hell in Dante's Divine Comedy. Satan has 3 heads. Well, 3 faces with 3 mouths. And in each of those mouths, he's chewing something. Brutus, Cassius, killers of Julius Caesar, and Brutus, Cassius, and Judas, the three great traitors. But he chews them for all eternity. Slowly, painfully. This is what time does. Shakespeare has a sonnet about, this monument of time, and it's about how time wears everything down. So, rather than let time wear us down, let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball. Pretty enigmatic line. What is he talking about? Let's get our strength, our weakness, and some read that as masculinity, femininity, roll them together. Dunn's comment about, to one neutral thing, both sexes fit. So now they make this one thing, and it's a ball, implying its completion and its infinity because it's a circle, all right? And tear our pleasures with rough strife. I've had students, write papers about this. Oh, he's talking about bondage and sadomasochism. He's not talking about BDSM or any of that stuff. Tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Now, the 1681 edition puts iron grates of life. Many editors see gates of life as a typically Marvellian inversion of the biblical gates of death. Possible. Some have actually even suggested that the gates of life could be referring to an old lawn game that probably none of you are familiar with, called croquet, that has wickets that are made of iron or steel, sometimes wood, and what do? You knock a ball through the wicket. And you got to get through all the wickets to get to the final, I can't remember what it's called, post. But the balls have to go through. Could be that he's referring to that. Not sure. Tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, if we do all that, though we cannot make our sun stand still, biblical allusion, Joshua prayed before the battle at Ai that the Lord would cause the sun to stand still, and he does. Okay, we can't make our sun stand still, yet we will make him run. What does that mean? We'll make the sun run. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. Well, what's the indicator of time for us down here? It's not if you're up in the International Space Station. It's not if you're in, science fiction and you're off on some spaceship out in outer space. It's the movement of the sun. Okay? Though we can't stop the sun, meaning what? Making this night, listen to pop, an awful lot of pop music. Oh, if only this night would last forever, kind of a thing. If we can't do that, we'll do what? Oh, we're going to make the sun work to catch up to us. In other words, we're going to be doubly, triply, quadruply, however you want to put it, busy. We're going to get so busy having sex, it'll be like the sun stands still. We will kind of metaphorically make this night last forever. Okay? Yeah. That's a carpe diem. Is it meant, or is to the virgins to make much of time? Are they meant seriously? That is, are these some guy, sidles up next to a girl in a bar and says, hey, and tries it out? No. These are entirely written to show the wit, the intellectual gymnastics each of the writers is capable of doing. Okay, turn for just a moment. We're done, but just a moment. Turn back to Robert Herrick, because I just want to point out two poems. look at, we won't go over all of it, but look at the first one on page 956, the argument of his book. This was standard practice in this period. Anne Bradstreet, first American poet, does the exact same thing. That is, you're told what the book is about. And notice what he says, what the speaker says he's going to write about. I sing of brooks, of blossoms, birds and bowers, April, May, June, July flowers. Spring, early summer. I sing of maples, hawk carts, wassails, wakes, bridegrooms, brides, bridal cakes. These are all celebratory things and communal activities. All right? I write of youth of love and have access by these to sing of cleanly wantonness. Clean, innocent. It's not about hookers, whores, and, gigolos and such. I sing of dews of rains and piece by piece a balm of oil, a spice of ambergris. All things of nature. I sing of times transshifting, moving back and forth. And I write how roses first came red and lilies white. I write of groves of twilights, and I sing the court of Mab, the fairy queen. So I talk about fairies and the supernatural world, and of the fairy king. I write of hell, I sing and ever shall of heaven. Ever shall, like in eternity. When I die, I will always be praising. Speaker knows where he's going, so to speak. And hope to have it after. What is the speaker told us is the argument of the book? All of human experience. I'm going to write about everything. See, George Herbert, it's the religious stuff. It's about the soul. This, it is about the soul, but it's also about the body. It's about desires. It's about fun things. Okay? Next one, we're not going to read it, but just kind of, for interest's sake, read his farewell to sack. Sack isn't the bed. Sack is cheap booze. Go to a liquor store, look for something like Boone's Farm or Boone's Hill wine. It's, you can get like a Magnum for $1.99, like a gallon. Okay? It's cheap stuff. In Shakespeare's Henry IV Part 1, Falstaff goes off to battle, and he's got a bottle of sack stuck in his holster because he's an alcoholic. But it's cheap. The whole poem is about the speaker saying, you gotta go away from me. Why? It's almost an ode to alcoholism. Too much. You're too strong. Okay, we'll stop there since there's nothing else to do. There's no quiz, right? Yeah, no quiz. The exam is up. Some people have already taken it. Due Sunday night, 11:59. I'm probably going to start grading papers. I haven't yet. Probably today. Grades are due Monday the 13th. So that's when you'll be able to find them. If you need your grade before then, give me at least a week to have, got to be at least until Monday morning next week, the 6th. Give me at least until the 7th or 8th to get everything done. All right. Have a good Christmas break. Hope the rest of your classes go well. Finals, papers, all that stuff.